Okay, so this next video is more about the American empire collapsing. And this guy, he does a really good job. He breaks down the collapse of us, or what's happening in the United States. And it's just funny to me when, I talk to people, I try to talk to as many people as I can, and they'll usually agree with me on the points that he's making. But everyone has this delusion that, well, it'll be 50 years out, or 100 years from now, we'll collapse. Well, I don't know. Could be less. Could be less. I mean, who knows? But hopefully it will be 100 years out. But I really would not be surprised if it's sooner. But okay, let's listen to him.
Talk about, of course, the upcoming VRIC Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. What to expect at one of the world's largest and most premier resource conferences. Welcome back to the show, my friend Jake. Good to see you.
David, it's great to see you, man.
Let's start with this tweet by Ray Dalio. It's happening now. The existing fiat monetary order, the domestic political order, and the international geopolitical order are all breaking down. So we are on the brink of wars. It's all happening because of the big cycle that is driven by the big five forces I've described repeatedly. Let's just analyze what he said in his first sentence. The existing fiat monetary order breaking down, political order breaking down. Heard on Commodities, Jay Martin, President and CEO of VRIC Media. And we'll talk about, of course, the upcoming VRIC Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. What to expect at one of the world's largest and most premier resource conferences. Welcome back to the show, my friend Jay. Good to see you.
David, it's great to see you, man.
Let's start with this tweet by Ray Dalio. It's happening now. The existing fiat monetary order, the domestic political order, and the international geopolitical order are all breaking down. So we are on the brink of wars. It's all happening because of the big cycle that is driven by the big five forces I've described repeatedly.
Okay, so let's break down what Ray Dalio, his tweet a little bit. And so just some background for everyone. Ray Dalio made his money. He pioneered using computer models to predict the future. And you would invest accordingly. So he's a very rich man, one of the richest men in the world, multi-billionaire. Bridgewater and Associates was his company that he made. So he understands how the system works. He's written books on these financial cycles. So he really understands how the system works. He understands that the system is crumbling. So let's break down a little bit his tweet in more context before David talks. So the existing monetary order, the domestic political order. So people within their countries, they don't trust their own currencies, right? It's not just the United States problem. This is a worldwide problem. The Europeans, not just the United States, Europeans, the Latin Americans, nobody trusts their own currency. And they don't trust that the governments are going to improve their lives, right? The international geopolitical order are all breaking down. So what used to be kind of a balance of power, as the United States looks for more and more areas to, the United States is the dominant empire currently, but we are a dying empire. And as we look for more and more pools to kind of dominate places where we can extract money, like that's one of the reasons we just, kind of took over Venezuela. We're talking about taking over Greenland, Canada. The empire is looking for ways to keep making money. And because of that, no one trusts the United States anymore, including our allies, right? They're starting to understand that slowly. And that's what Ray Dalio is really getting to. He says it's all happening because of the business cycle, right? So as the United States, we've extracted all we can, they're desperate for ways to extract more wealth. And that's basically what he's alluding to. It's driven by the big five forces I've described repeatedly and laid out in detail in my book. And then he makes a plug for his book, right? But I do appreciate that he has a good map he has like 9 stages. I encourage everyone to check out Ray Dalio's book, or at least listen to what he says. But yeah, so okay, that's background on Ray Dalio, and let's listen to what this guy has to say.
Now, so we are on the brink of wars. It's all happening because of the big cycle that is driven by the big five forces I've described repeatedly. So then he's talking about his book, but let's just analyze what he said in his first sentence. The existing fiat monetary order breaking down, political order breaking down, and the international geopolitical order. How do these forces play out together? How do they interplay? And are we seeing a breakdown of the existing fiat monetary order? Is that what's driving the prices of gold and silver to astronomical levels never before seen, Jay?
Yeah, what Ray is referring to is the 3 major red flags that we see during the sunset years of every documented empire. And so you can look at the blueprint that's been laid out by the British Empire, the Dutch Empire, the Spanish Empire, or even the Portuguese. These are all world orders that have existed just during the last 600 years, the rise and fall of those and the rise of the American. which should, first of all, just give you a bit of perspective on how quickly power does rotate around the world. But what Ray is referring to is you can study the rise, plateau, and fall of all of those powers and find the same economic activities and societal behaviors, like watching the same movie on repeat every single time during the rise, the plateau, and the fall. And during the fall, you see the three flags that Ray mentioned. He talked about the money, he talked about the internal disorder, and he talked about the geopolitical competition. So what he's talking about is, as an empire ages, it becomes more wealthy but less productive, and people begin demanding more. Governments get over their skis in terms of expenses because they have to protect trade routes everywhere, but they're not producing as much as they used to before they were a wealthy economy because they've outsourced that to poorer nations. When you spend more than you earn for too long, it's a problem, unless you can print your own currency, and that's what inevitably happens every single time.
So I would add, let me just elaborate on what he's saying. Everything he's saying is right. Like, United States, we used to produce like 50% of the world's stuff. Now it's almost nothing, right? So we don't make anything. I have this debate with people. I always say, I don't know. I don't think it's so sure that we could win a war against China and Russia. And people are like, oh, we don't understand how powerful we are. And yeah, we are very powerful. It's true. But then my comeback is, okay, we don't produce anything. How are you going to win a war without an industrial base? And then people always it basically shut down. That pretty much ends the debate. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he's right. We don't produce anything. Our population is lazy. We're not educated. I don't know. Yeah, it's not looking good, and the empire keeps looking for easy wins to kind of keep the Ponzi scheme going. And the money printing and the military, that's all we have left, and that's kind of. It's all we have left, and I don't know how much longer that's going to last. So let's hear what else he has to say.
You can go back thousands of years to the Assyrians, the Romans. You'll find examples of currency expansion, whether they are clipping coins, diluting metals, printing physical money, or these days just adding digits to bank treasuries. It's the exact same thing.
I will also comment that people are not having babies anymore too. That's another big thing. For whatever reason, maybe people can't afford babies, maybe they don't see the benefit, but that's another big reason why empires fall and collapse is basically people stop having babies. They stop replenishing the population, and our education system is in the toilet, healthcare system's in the toilet. We're not making babies. We're not building anything. What do we got to work with here? All right.
You create money to cover and paper over your losses. The impact of this, obviously, is that everything that you can't print goes up in value relative to the thing that you can. And because it's typically the affluent people who own that stuff, the businesses, the land, the precious metals, they become wealthier in currency terms. And people that just earn cash, save cash, and spend cash, they become poor relative to those people. And that's how the wealth gap is accelerated. And because most people don't study monetary policy, they don't understand why they're poorer this year than they were last year. They don't understand why the house they couldn't afford last year is somehow less affordable this year. And when you're in trouble and you're in a bit of pain, but you don't know why, you will find an enemy. And that's why Ray lists the second red flag there after the money as internal disorder. People begin infighting inside the country. They say, why is there an increasing divide? Why am I poor? Why are they richer? Because in a scenario of rapid money expansion, if you own assets, you get wealthier by doing absolutely nothing. And people notice this and they can't understand why. And
so he brings up another point, a great point that he brings up, and I want to elaborate on it, is when people feel desperate, they feel out of control. Remember, your lizard brain kicks in, right? And then when your lizard brain is kicking in, you're desperate to find any bit of comfort, any bit of safety, right? So you feel lack of control, and then you have this is why the left wing is so scared of Trump, is you have this strong man, whatever you want to call it. He's this guy who's fighting for you, right? I know he's not fighting for you, or he's fighting for himself, okay? But when you're in that state, of despair, your lizard brain is kicking in. Any little thing that might give you some comfort or some strength, people latch onto it. So it could be authoritarian leader like Donald Trump. It could be racism. Let's blame the people next to you that are different. Blame, they're looking for blame and comfort wherever they can, right? That's why people blame the government. They blame, the illegals or regulation. Okay, well, none of those things are actually keeping you down. These are not really your enemy. They're really just distractions. And he's he's bringing out that point.
Infighting begins, civil unrest populates, and people can't agree on anything anymore. Every issue becomes polarizing, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how the first issue, money expansion, which Ray talks about, leads to the second issue, which is internal disorder, which is the second one he mentioned. But a country can function that way, like in that state of disorder, for an incredibly long time, until a third-party competitor rises up somewhere else in the world who can send a message to the global marketplace and say, look, we've been doing business on their terms for a very long time, but they're a mess now. They're insolvent, their people can't agree, they're politically unstable, and they're becoming unpredictable. You can trust us, and we can show you a better way to do business. And that third party, that external competitor, is the geopolitical tension that Ray's referring to as his third point. And you'll see this every single time, David, and often that third-party competitor, that external competitor, isn't just one country. It's often a band of smaller nations that are able to park their ideological differences in order to overthrow the existing hegemon. I mean, think about as we transitioned from the pound sterling to the US dollar, during the sunset years of that empire, we had American and Soviet forces fighting shoulder to shoulder to defeat a common enemy, ideologically opposite, but unified against one threat. And as soon as that threat was defeated, those ideological differences boiled to the surface and completely took over. And the next day, we found ourselves in the throes of the Cold War. And so you could point to, I think lots of symptoms today that would give you assurance. We are experiencing all three of those. But this game can be played for a very long time. And, people who are kind of juries out were in the sunset years of the American empire. I think there's tons of evidence to make that argument. And I can make a very compelling argument for that. But you can also look at precedent set in history where it looked like a nation was about to collapse and it didn't, and the British Empire is a classic example. If you were to step back and look at the British world order during the end of the 18th century, you would see a nation that without question was about to collapse. They were bankrupt and insolvent from funding wars with Napoleon all over Europe. Even though they won those wars, they were incredibly costly. Simultaneously, they fought a war overseas for their most productive colonies in America, and they lost those wars, right? And when you finance a war and lose, you don't get anything back. It's just a loss. And losing the Revolutionary War in the United States was much more than losing a war because they lost their most productive colony, the entire cotton trade. It was a massive blow to the UK economy to the extent that by the year 1800, inflation in London had hit 30%. Now remember, we were losing our minds not that long ago, about 9% inflation. So imagine 30%. But the point is, if you were to step back and look at the British Empire that year, 1800, all the writing was on the wall, right? They were insolvent. They were expanding the money supply. There was internal disorder all over the place. And externally, they were a mess.
Yeah, again, he brings out a lot of good points. What I would add is I think that my understanding is the British Empire is unique in that the British kind of understood they couldn't keep this empire together, and they slowly sold it off. They understood, this isn't working, and they basically sold off their empire, and now a hollow shell of what they used to be. The United States we're doing basically all the worst things, what he's talking about. We're not dying gracefully. He does bring out a good point that, the empire could last, the party could last, the Ponzi scheme could last another 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Maybe. The United States the dollar still does have a lot of staying power. I think, I don't remember, the number's always changing, but I think 60 to 70% of all debt in the world still needs to be paid out in US dollars. So there's a huge amount of inertia, but the driving force behind the US dollar is quickly eroding. So when does the party end? I don't know. But he does bring out a good point there.
But hindsight now, we can see that their greatest years were still ahead of them. They discovered a new resource they controlled at that time. It always comes back to who controls the resources. Another one of their colonies in India produced a very specific resource, and they found a very specific customer for that resource. And obviously, I'm talking about the opium trade. And this is one of the key reasons that the British Empire resurrected from this place of despair and found another 100 years of prosperity on the back of a terrible trade and a very destructive trade that led to the century of humiliation in China. So
basically the British bankrolled their empire for another 100 years by taking advantage of the Chinese. That about checks out.
That's what Ray's referring to. I think the evidence is clear, staring us in the face, but it's very hard to predict.
Okay, so that's a high level state of our empire, and I encourage everyone to double check, find. Don't just trust what he says or what I say, but do your own research and see where do you think, where do we land in the greater world? The good news is, we probably can't stop this. We probably don't have control, but we can control the world around us in our near area. right? Our little community. So to combat this, my solution is to improve yourself. If we're not making anything anymore, then go learn how to make things. Go learn how to grow vegetables. Learn how to raise chickens. Learn how to make a coffee table. Or just constantly be improving yourself. When you need it, you have it, right? You can survive, and with or without the American dollar, with or without the U.S. Navy. That's my suggestion on how we can, combat the situations that we're in. All right, thank you.